On the Road with Kelly and Bob is brought to you by Mueller Metal Roofs and Buildings. Made in America, made to last. Coming up on this episode.
So what I love about birdwatchers is that they listen to the world the way that I do. And we listen so intensely to the quiet that any scratch in the leaves has us looking for a white-throated sparrow.
Hi, we're Kelly.
And Bob Phillips, and we're on the perpetual road trip of America's backroads.
Where the people are real.
The stories are rich.
And the journey is always the destination. Hi, and welcome to this edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob. I'm Kelly Phillips.
And I'm Bob Phillips. Okay, this is a little bit awkward, but today we're going to ask people to shut up and listen.
Oh, well, that certainly needs a little bit of background, maybe some explanation.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, we're not asking them to shut up and listen to us. Well, I mean, not necessarily anyway. They can if they want to. But to just take some time to be quiet, pull the headphones or earpods out of their ears and listen to the world around them.
I get it. This is something you and I have talked about a lot over the years. It seems like everyone needs to be constantly entertained these days.
Yep.
Mostly by artificial means. If you count the number of people you run into on the street who are listening to music or to their phones or who knows what. Well, I mean, it's a lot of them.
So now you and I have met this person who has devoted a big part of her life to just listening to the sounds around us. And her story about how she came to do what she does, well, it really got our attention.
Let's face it, it's a noisy world we live in. If you're in a big city or anywhere that you find lots of people and cars and equipment and, well, just noise, it's hard to get away from it.
You'd think we humans would want to unplug from all that noise, but truth is, we keep making more of it. Take note next time you're on a walking path or out riding a bicycle or even on a nature hike. Notice how many people are wearing headphones.
Maybe it's time we all take a breath. Remove the ear pods and just listen to the natural sounds of the world. Dianne Ballon says it all starts with a moment of silence.
I actually have a visual arts background. As a little kid, I have memories of painting, doing the little oil paintings. We would drive up to New Hampshire in the fall to see the leaves, and it's kind of a humorous memory now, but I can remember my whole family would sit in the car while I sat on the log outside and did a painting. But I did that as a kid, and I loved art. Those moments really took me away, similar to when I am out as we are here in the landscape in nature. So very early on, I knew that I wanted to do that.
We are sitting at a picnic table with Dianne Ballon, listening intently to the story of her life. It's a beautiful setting at a place called Portland Headlight, a lighthouse at Cape Elizabeth, Maine, in Fort Williams Park. It's still early in the day, but we are not the only ones here. A few people are roaming about, here to see the iconic lighthouse or maybe just to take a walk on this misty morning in Maine.
Dianne has invited us here because it's the spot where she made one of the many recordings of the sounds around us. A noisy gull flies overhead while we talk, and a giant diesel truck rambles by, loud enough to stop our conversation until it passes. But those are not the sounds Dianne is interested in sharing with us.
And how I got into sound was after I graduated from college, listening to National Public Radio's All Things Considered. And I was very moved by certain pieces that would come on the air. They weren't news reports. They were very sound rich. Often they were humorous, conversational, and I just remember literally stopping in my tracks and saying, I want to do this.
And even though it can be a long way between hearing something you like on the radio and actually doing that something yourself, it wasn't any time at all until Dianne was also creating those stories she liked so much. Her pieces quickly made their way to NPR.
What was it about the way that they did these pieces and their use of sound that really attracted you?
First early pieces that I produced had a similar feeling as to what I was hearing, which was humorous stories about a particular subject was what I worked on. So as an example, I did a piece on lawn mowing stories. So I had interviewed friends. How do you mow the lawn? Could you tell me what's aggravating about mowing the lawn? And then I recorded the sounds of someone starting up a mower. I actually asked someone to mow over a rock because you always mow over a rock.
Always.
And then I had that sound while someone's saying, you always mow over a rock. That's how I produced the piece.
You placed the listener on location by doing that, didn't you?
Yes.
Now, Dianne's recordings are not like some fake attention-getting video you'll find on TikTok, nor are they high-energy, impulse-driven, chaotic commotion. They are real sounds from real life, audible moments that tell a story about the history and culture of our world.
We asked Dianne to share some of those pieces with us, along with the backstory of how and why she got them.
For years, I've been very moved by the sound of a nautical bellbuoy, which is offshore and it guides boats into the harbor or into coastal areas. I'm looking right now at the one that I recorded. I vacation up at Arcadia National Park twice a year, but every time I go up there at Bass Harbor Lighthouse, there is a bellbuoy offshore that just rings so beautifully. It has a very raw and uneven sound. And so for years, I thought about how I was going to record it. Get there at the crack of dawn, which is when I record because there's no people sounds, no car sounds, and record this bellbuoy. And that is one of the recordings that I have for you to hear. Every time I went, I listened until finally one September, I made this recording.
We got to spend part of our time in New England with a wonderful woman named Dianne Ballon, a person who has not only opened her ears, but opened her heart to all that is around us.
It was a day filled with moments of conversation and moments filled with the sounds of our natural world, a world we hope won't ever go away.
What could you tell somebody, what are they missing by not taking in the sounds around them?
It really is being in the present, isn't it? It's being able to stop that voice inside of your head that worries, or it's being able to let all of that go and be. That's really what it's about. And my recommendation to your listeners is to find a trail, leave your phone in the car, and make an effort to open your ears to sound so that you'll hear your footsteps walking any kind of branches that you're passing by. Now, if it's this time of year, bird song. And really just take the time to be present in that beauty.
Okay, there was a lot more to our conversation with Dianne, and she shared a lot more of her recordings with us. So let's listen to those now. Stay with this, folks, because it's really worth it.
I have a fine arts degree from Massachusetts College of Art. And when we were in college, there was a bunch of us because we had a really good art department in our high school, so a lot of us went to the same college. And I can remember we always said we want to major in fine art, and knew that if you majored in fine art versus art education, you wouldn't have a job when you graduated. At the time, there weren't any classes in broadcasting, or I didn't want to be a news reporter. So what I did, which is amazing to me when I think back on it, is I found out who the NPR engineer was. His name was Skip Peasy. This was back in the 1980s. And sent him a note saying, could you give me recorder recommendations, equipment recommendations to record? And he sent me a mimeograph sheet or a copy of the reporter packages that they had at the time. Excellent, very good, and good. At the time, I couldn't afford the excellent, but I didn't want the good. The other thing that National Public Radio, to this day, actually moves me by is their sound quality. So not only did I want to do this, but I really wanted to achieve good sound. So I bought the very good package, and that was a Sony TCM 5000 cassette recorder.
Very familiar with that.
An Electro Voice,
Yes.
handheld, omnidirectional microphone. And basically I learned myself how to record. So it just was very moving to me that it's really storytelling and conversation. You can talk to anybody about any subject and get these amazing stories. Humorous as well as moving, and that's what I did for quite a while. I did one piece called Hometown Parade, and it was memories of like marching in a hometown parade, playing the band, and I asked the band director if I could record the band practicing. What I really wanted was the wonderful out of tune sounds. I couldn't tell him that because
Of course not.
That's not what he wanted anyone to hear.
And also he yelled at the band, "Let's do it again," and I was ecstatic inside, saying this is exactly what I want.
What does it mean to you when people listen to your stories and they got what you did?
It's very touching to me. It's very moving. In fact, that Hometown Parade piece, I would get emails from listeners across the country who had heard my pieces. There was somebody who I knew who I interviewed. He was in the band, and they used to wear like a wool suit uniform, and so it would be like 90 degrees out and everybody would be passing out. That was the story. And he called me and told me that someone, when the piece aired, was out west in a tent camping and heard the piece and called him and said, "Was that you I heard talking about the wool uniform?" I did a birding sound installation where I really recorded people's bird watching memory. It just was very, very moving, and I am a bird watcher. And so what I love about bird watchers is that they listen to the world the way that I do. And we listen so intensely to the quiet that any scratch in the leaves has us looking for a white-throated sparrow. And so we listen to the quiet as well. and are present for that sound. I did receive a Maine Artist Fellowship from the Maine Arts Commission for my work in sound, and it was during the height of COVID. At that time, I was recording Maine coastal sounds as well as doing some recording up in the Arctic. I recorded in Iceland and also in Norway. But because of the pandemic, I said, okay, I will spend the entire year recording on the coast of Maine. I could do that pandemic-wise. It was just me going around. So that was when I had the idea of having somebody boat me out to a bell buoy as opposed to me recording a bell buoy from the shore. I looked up on nautical maps Casco Bay, which is where we are now, to see what bell buoys were located close by, so I could have a note of where I wanted to go. And then I needed somebody to boat me out. So I found somebody, and he became so understanding of what I was after that at one point he said, how about if I boat you over here and maybe we can hear the bell buoy and the whistle buoy sounding at the same time.
He got it.
He got it. So we made several trips together. And here's the sound of the uneven ring of a bell buoy in Casco Bay with my captain announcing our location.
We are located near Portland Harbor, Maine. Approach lighted bell buoy 12.
I do want to say that I asked Kelly and Bob to meet me at Portland Head Light, which is one of the iconic lighthouses in Maine. And I have recorded the foghorn at Portland Head Light. I wanted to record the iconic sound of the foghorn at Portland Head Light. I needed a foggy morning, a high tide, and calm conditions at sunrise, the optimal time to record. The foghorn I expected did not sound. I was shocked by this. And so when I got home, I did a little bit of research and discovered that I found an article that 15 lighthouses in Maine were converted to a new system known as MRAS, or Mariner Radio Activated Sound System, and that lighthouses are turned on automatically by mariners out on the water dialing in on their radio and no longer sound on a foggy day. I was devastated by this. So I called the Coast Guard and asked for a list of all the lighthouses in Maine that were converted, because I wasn't sure whether all of them were converted or not. I was sent a 455-page government document.
455 pages.
So it's just easy to peruse.
With 2 sets of page numbers of all the, I believe it was like New England, all of the day beacons, buoys, whatever, in New England. And then the Coast Guard guy told me that it's updated weekly. So I was like, this is not going to work. It'll take me years to figure this out. So I called the Maine Historical Society and I said, do you know anybody who knows anything about foghorns at lighthouses? And they gave me this gentleman from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, who is a historian in lighthouses. So I called him and asked him what lighthouses are foghorns still active on a foggy day. And he said, well, just about all of them are converted, but somebody at the museum at Portland Headlight has a radio, and they will turn on the sound at the foghorn for the visitors from time to time. So I called the museum and I borrowed the radio. So I returned to Portland Headlight, this time on a clear morning, and with the radio, I turned on and recorded the sound of the foghorn. It's very difficult sometimes for me to come to these places because I almost want to say, put your phone away, stop, and listen. I mean, sound, it takes a back door to visuals. Even visually, you know, everybody is at the lighthouse taking pictures of each other, and almost feels to me like they're not completely there in a way. They're not hearing the sounds or really seeing what is here.
Is this just what our society has evolved to, or?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's interesting because I was thinking about at the end of winter, I get a little anxious for spring because with it come all the people sounds. Everybody opens their windows, so there's sounds from houses, the car. Windows are open, so you're hearing more radios, lawnmowers, etc. So in winter, it is so moving to walk on the frozen ground, and if you step on a branch, the crack of that branch is like the sound of a gunshot. And also, you know, there'll be two trees that are leaning against each other, creaking. Normally, for somebody to be able to hear that, you have to pretty much be really listening and open to listening. And that's why, like bird watchers, even with the spring migration here, with all the wonderful birds singing, we also can hear that little scratch in the leaves.
I know you had an exhibit at a Maine museum, and you got to record some of the different sounds.
Well, what was amazing about that was that initially, because this was an exhibit on my coastal Maine sounds, initially I thought I would have a few objects in the museum from their collection to accompany the sounds, like an old rowboat. So I went online and I looked up in their collection skiffs, and up came a billion skiffs. So then I thought, would the museum have any foghorns? And to my absolute astonishment, about 6 to 8 foghorns came up. Then I searched bells and whistles, same thing. And that was when I had the idea to record some of the sounding objects from the museum's collection. In all of the adventure of finding the objects, I forgot that they may be too fragile to make a sound. So I had to wait until the museum staff checked them out in order to record them. Curator Catherine Sear was my right-hand woman. Because I was not able to hear what these objects sounded like ahead of time, we spent much time making sure I recorded all the possible scenarios. I recorded the smaller objects first, and then we moved to the basement to record the Minot Shipyard bell. The bell was stored on a wooden dolly. The museum staff, now keenly aware of the quiet I needed to record, moved the bell to the painting storage area for a more insulated sound environment. What with the bell before me and the vintage ships all around me, surely I stepped back 100 years to a time of wooden sailing ships and this very bell that summoned the shipyard workers to break for lunch or call it a day. Here is the sound of the Minot Shipyard bell. The Maine Maritime Museum is on the Kennebec River. There's a lot of lighthouses on the Kennebec River. In fact, at one point it makes like a 90-degree turn in the river. And so I wanted to record many bell buoys, and then noticed that there were lighthouses also along the Kennebec River. On a cold winter day in early March, I spoke with Mike Krendler, president of the Range Light Keepers. The river was relatively quiet that morning and wide like the ocean. Snow and ice from a late February storm lined the riverbanks and dotted the long boardwalks leading up to the range towers. Here's the sound of the Fiddler's Reach fog bell.
We don't have a mechanical fog bell striker in place right now, but I can demonstrate what the bell sounds like using a block of wood. The characteristic for this fog signal was 2 strikes every 20 seconds. I'm just going to give you a 2-strike pattern for a demonstration.
A wonderful note here. I was aware that the bell striker was not in place before I arrived, so I was not expecting Mike to ring the bell. Instead, he not only rang the bell, but described the characteristic of the fog signal as 2 strikes every 20 seconds. Anyone else would have just picked up a block of wood and rung the bell. This is an example of the magic of recording both field sound and interviews. You come prepared, you have an idea of what you'll get, and then unexpectedly you receive more. I love the elusiveness of sound, and this goes back to a moment ago when we spoke about the magic of sound recording and those unexpected moments that you receive when you cannot even anticipate. I spent a week at Arcadia National Park exploring the Scoodic Peninsula and the small harbors of Korea, Winter Harbor, and Prospect Harbor for sound. When I record, I always scout out an area ahead of time to see what I'm up against in terms of unwanted sound, and then I return to record. When I located a whistle buoy at Scoodic Point, the buoy sang loud and clear, but when I returned the next day to record, I could barely hear it. So I set up down by the water and captured this, the delicious sound of the incoming tide at Scoodic Point.
What does all of this do for you in here, to go out and be able to collect these sounds and tell these stories and give these experiences to people who hear
To your listeners.
Yeah.
This is my passion. This is, I cannot not do this. I am so moved by sound. The other side of the coin, which I also love, is that I don't have to record every single sound that I hear or love. That being out in the outdoors, I can experience the sound for its beauty, for what it is, and not feel like I need to record. Some people ask me, do you leave a recorder in the car so that you can jump out and record? And similar to when I go on vacation, I'm listening, and listening really works for me.
That's a more personal experience, isn't it? You're doing that for you, for your soul.
And I do love when people get it, experience the same, being moved by what I am presenting, actually.
How long do you think you'll do this? Forever?
Yes. Yeah.
Part of your DNA.
Yeah, again, it's hard not to.
And if you just take a moment to stop all the hustle and bustle and just breathe, listen, you too could become fascinated with all the little sounds that we sometimes really don't hear. We want to thank you for joining us this week for On the Road with Kelly and Bob. Be sure and like us on Facebook and Instagram, or you can even check out our YouTube page. See some behind-the-scenes video. New episodes drop every week, so be sure and download that free Odyssey app and listen anytime, anywhere.